Well, looks like we've got most people in. Okay, we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Meg. I'm part of the team here at Arrangements Abroad and the Museum Travel Alliance. We are thrilled to have the opportunity today to hear from one of our expert lecturers, Chris Noey. Chris is a frequent lecturer on MTA programs, bringing his expertise from a background as an art historian, an author, and Emmy Award-winning producer on films on art and culture. This year alone, he has led trips in Laos, the Persian Gulf, Saudi Arabia, India, and a cruise through the Canary Islands, Morocco, and Portugal. Perhaps some of you accompanied him on some of these programs. We are pleased to have the opportunity today to hear from Chris about one of his favorite and frequent destinations, Egypt. If you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A chat function down there at the bottom of your screen, and we'll be happy to address all the questions at the end. So over to you, Chris.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Meg. I'm really looking forward to this trip. I was trying to add up in my head how many times I've taken it on an Arrangements Abroad trip. So I think this is the seventh time, and it just never gets old. I always look forward to it. Here, as we say, it's Egypt, the Nile, a journey into antiquity, December 29th, 2026 to January 9th, 2027. And what I hope happens is a little bit about what's going to happen now. As you see, this is what I put as my first slide. Here is the kind of first photos of the mask of King Tutankhamun when taken when it was first revealed to Howard Carter in his excavation in the 1920s, black and white photo. But what I hope happens in the course of our trip is that this comes to life. Let's see. And for some reason, the slide is not advancing. Always good to have something in the beginning. So here, yikes. This is sort of how it looked. I have a little bit of a problem here, but I think it's okay now.
Well, that looks
Good.
better, Dave.
Yeah. So always like to start with a glitch just to make sure I'm on my toes. The trip begins in Cairo. And there you see a great view of Cairo as it's built up around the Nile. And from there, this is just a kind of preview of where it is that we're going to be going. So it begins in Cairo, and very quickly we head to really perhaps the oldest site there, the Step Pyramid of Djoser in Saqqara, 2750 BCE. And then we also visit, of course, Giza, where we will see the extraordinary pyramids and photographs that do not do justice to the scale of these monuments. But while we're there, we also go to the Sphinx. And what's great about these Arrangements Abroad trips and traveling with the Museum Travel Alliance is that we have private access to the Sphinx. And so we're able to visit it. Our group is able to visit it by ourselves, have kind of a special access that the crowds don't normally get to experience. And it's really amazing to see the monument up close. Also in Giza is the new Grand Egyptian Museum, or GEM, that opened finally after a very, very long wait recently. I'm going to talk more about that a little bit later. But before we leave Cairo, we also explore Islamic Cairo. And I think perhaps less familiar to most people, but it is one of the world's densest and oldest medieval urban hubs. There, amazingly, more than any place in Europe, there are 600 registered historic monuments. And it's an unmatched collection of Islamic architecture and really helps tell the story of that moment when Cairo was a global center of religious learning. And we'll see some of the great monuments there, like this, the Mosque of Ibn Tulun, one of my favorites. It has a kind of stark, almost modern uh, quality to it. But then we leave Cairo and then head to Upper Egypt, as it's called, to Luxor. Uh, and we fly there um, and visit the Karnak Temple, one of the largest religious monuments in the world, and also across on the west bank, the extraordinary mortuary temple of Hatshepsut. And this amazing temple, built as a kind of, as I say, a mortuary temple for Hatshepsut, one of the extraordinary and very few women who ruled as pharaoh in Egypt, and built one of the most powerful monuments, kind of pushed up against the wall of the cliff that kind of pulls a kind of mystical power from the landscape. It's an amazing, amazing monument, and one that was excavated initially by the Metropolitan Museum of Art. But of course, the reason why you come to Egypt and you come to Luxor is to visit the Valley of the Kings, and where many, many of the pharaohs were buried, including Tutankhamun. We have access to some of the greatest tombs there in the Valley of the Kings. Here's the tomb of Ramses V and VI. And it's just extraordinary the way the ancient world comes to life on the walls of these tombs. They were almost all of them, really all of them, with the exception of Tutankhamun, were robbed at some point in history, but they're still the extraordinary wall paintings that are a feast for the eyes. So after visiting a number of different monuments in Luxor, a museum, other tombs, we do the part of the trip which I love the most, which is that we get on a boat and cruise up the Nile. And here you'll see on my map, I put the kind of line of our trip up the Nile along uh, uh, seeing the various monuments along the way. And what's amazing at this point is there is no distance from the Nile to the monument. Here you see the Nile in the foreground, and the background, Komombo. Similar experience happens in Edfu. And it's just so enchanting to have that connection to these monuments as we travel along the river. We end up in Aswan and see great monuments like the Temple of Philae. And from Aswan, we fly by private jet to Abu Simbel. And this is Abu Simbel, as you probably know, this great New Kingdom monument that was relocated in the years 1964 to 1968. One of the great conservation projects of all time. Here you see, one of the heads being moved. It was raised up several hundred feet because the waters of the Aswan Dam of Lake Nasser were going to flood it. And so beginning in the Kennedy administration, there was this extraordinary conservation project. And what's so great in this case about that we fly there by private jet is that if we get lucky, it doesn't always happen, but it happens most of the time, because we haven't come on a commercial airliner, we very often have the entire monument to ourselves because our plane gets there before the commercial planes get there. And then from there, we leave Abu Simbel. You see this extraordinary monument, and fly back to Cairo, and that's the end of the trip. Now, I'm going to kind of begin. I have some kind of key reasons about why I really think people should seriously consider this trip. But you may ask the question, why leave home? Because if we think about the American collections of Egyptian art, we have extraordinary things. My own Metropolitan Museum of Art, where I worked for so many years, has, the greatest collection in America. They have 26,000 objects. And they have the extraordinary Temple of Dendur in the museum. But they're not alone among American collections. There are, great collections in, for instance, in Chicago with this monumental 16-foot sculpture of Tutankhamun. There's a great collection of Old Kingdom sculpture in the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. There's also the Penn Museum in Philadelphia. I was running out of space on my slide, or I would have included the Brooklyn Museum as well. And I really encourage you, if you're thinking about this trip, if you're thinking about coming along, visit one of these collections if you can, someplace near you, just to experience these extraordinary holdings. But I bring this up because I really want to encourage everyone before coming on the trip to visit an Egyptian collection and then see, after they've been to Egypt, how much more it will mean to you when you've kind of breathed the air of Egypt and you've experienced life on the Nile. Which brings me to my kind of three reasons I want to encourage you, or three key reasons to encourage you to join this trip. And the first is that great river, the Nile. So here's some background. If we look back to around 10,000 BCE, and this is a kind of topographical view of Asia, Africa, and Europe. The earliest examples of agriculture appear around the Fertile Crescent and in China, in the kind of the Yellow River and Yangtze River valleys. And these are certainly, agriculture was fully in place and really thriving in these areas, certainly by 6,000 BCE. What's interesting when you think of the great agricultural abundance we associate with Egypt is that it was not part of this extraordinary transformation. If you look here, you'll see that it wasn't one of the places where agriculture first appeared. The other thing you'll notice about the map that I've shown you is how green North Africa is, because 10,000 years ago, North Africa was a verdant savanna. It had giraffes and gazelles and zebras and elephants and wild cattle. But around 6,000 years ago, that landscape, the rains stopped coming, and that landscape completely dried up. It's one of the most remarkable climate transformations in history. And so what happens if you look at this map of Egypt that I'm presenting you is that green savanna shrinks and shrinks and shrinks until all that's left is this abundant green land fed by the yearly floods that runs through the Nile, comes along the Nile. And then on either side of it, desert. It's an extraordinary landscape. It is in some ways unique in the world. Egypt has the lowest amount of rainfall of any country in the world, but has this extraordinary agricultural abundance because of the kind of life-giving soil brought to it in the annual flood. And so you have this geography that gets created there that shapes the cultural imagination of the Egyptian people. In their minds, that world of the farmland and the food and the abundance and the transportation along this great river was a world of order. But just on the other side of it was chaos in the desert. And they saw as well in their imagination, this was a world of abundance on the one hand, as opposed to danger. And they were surrounded by dangers of the desert mountains and the climate there, but also the dangers within the river of hippopotami and um, and crocodiles. So they had this very strong sense of the kind of light and dark, of positive and negative energies in the world surrounding them, and the need to maintain kind of cosmic order, kind of cosmic harmony. And this happens as um, that geography forces a large population um, out of the savanna into this very narrow strip of land. Eventually, probably around 3200 BCE, Egypt gets united under a pharaoh. And here's this so-called Narmer palette. The theory is this may be a representation of the very first pharaoh, the person who was able to unite the various provinces, the kind of local rulers and local political orders that made up Lower Egypt around the Delta and Upper Egypt close to, say, around the area of Luxor, where we're going. And he's shown wearing in this white crown that you see there is the white crown of Upper Egypt. And he unites this country and creates an extraordinary, what gets created in this period, perhaps by one person, perhaps by a whole group of them, is a kind of a whole new stable political and social order that will last for nearly 3,000 years. It is at its peak of this kind of political pyramid. It's the pharaoh in this particular beautiful relief sculpture that we see at the Temple of Edfu. He's being crowned by Lower Egypt, who's wearing the crown of the goddesses representing Lower Egypt and Upper Egypt. And they had with that uniting and establishing of a political order, there's a great belief on the part of the Egyptians that there's this concept of Maat, M-A-A-T, a kind of ethical truth that unites the universe. And there's a kind of cosmic harmony which they must work to maintain. And they were able to do this for so many, not simply centuries, but millennia, because they had extraordinary resources. First and foremost, they had food surpluses that were extraordinary. They had domesticated animals. Of all those animals they used to hunt on the savannah, the one that they were able to domesticate were the wild cattle. They had papyrus in Egypt, which they used as to create written records. And they had largely the textile they had was flax or linen. Cotton existed, but really that Egyptian cotton that we prize in our bath towels and sheets didn't really come into the fore until the 19th century. Linen was the textile of choice. And to an extraordinary degree, Egypt had gold. And gold was not used for money. It had a kind of extraordinary kind of spiritual resonance for the Egyptians. Because gold has a kind of sun-like brilliance and resists corrosion, it really was connected to their notion of the afterlife. And they saw gold as being like the flesh of the gods. Curiously enough, it wasn't used as currency, as I said, but it was, according, in the letters of Amarna, they say that the gold of Egypt is as abundant as dust on the ground. And it's kind of an extraordinary resource that they had throughout these centuries. So here, how does this connect to the Nile? The Nile is the kind of the lifeline that connects this society. The Nile and its not just the Nile River and the abundant land, but also that surrounding desert, um, supplied abundant resources for a rich culture, not just food, but also metal and stone and things that one could build with. It made possible a very stable political order because it was very easy for political forces to transit the entire country on the river. It nurtured a belief in an eternal afterlife, and it provided for our benefit the perfect climate for the preservation of material culture. Um, and that is what you really experience when on this trip, when you're on the boat. And I will say, I first came to Egypt when I was in graduate school, and I lived there for a year. It was spectacular, but I didn't have any money. I wasn't, graduate students do not get to take the Nile cruise. And I have to say, it's really the great thing that I missed. Even those years at the Metropolitan Museum, when I would go there for work, we weren't on the boat. And it was only when I began going on these trips and taking the boat that my whole understanding of Egyptian culture and Egyptian society and how crucial the river was to the uniting of this culture. It was only when I was on the boat that it really came to life for me. I mean, you have this experience going down the river, green land, sometimes built up, as you see with these village here, but with this stark desert behind. You have this pleasure of sailing by extraordinary ancient monuments, and sometimes ancient monuments where in the foreground are the people of Egypt today, and they are always present, and you see them working in the fields, and always this contrast, as you see here: river, green land, desert, just yards away. And I think to me, more than anything, the thing that I really recommend when people go on these trips is to have that experience of being on the water and experiencing this geography from that perspective. This is Aswan here. These wonderful sailboats that you see there. And then the second element I wanted to reason for people to go, particularly now, because it hasn't been the case till very recently, is to visit the Grand Egyptian Museum, and which only officially opened on November 1st, 2025. So it hasn't even been open for a year. Parts of it had opened before, and they're extraordinary collections, one of the largest museums in the world, certainly the largest Egyptian collection anywhere in the world. But what we were waiting for that official opening in November of 2025 was the artifacts from the tomb of Tutankhamun. There's the gold mask I already showed you once before. And for the first time in history, all 5,398 artifacts that accompanied King Tutankhamun on his perilous journey into the afterlife can be seen together. And it's very moving. Here you see this portrait of him when he was a boy, just extraordinarily um, charming, but also kind of profound humanity there. Or here, his throne, as you see it in the collection there, and in all these cases, you really are spending time with a real human being. Here, the throne, the back of the throne, this amazing, intimate scene between Tutankhamun the young, the boy king, and his wife, Akhenaten. And there you see, Akhenaten as she, kind of puts her hand on his shoulder. And there's something that happens as you visit this collection, how you really connect to the kind of human beings behind them. They're extraordinary things I've never seen here is the way they've put together his chariot. Um, uh, and with this kind of version of a horse pulling it, you know, his armor. Again, his leather armor and these extraordinary amulets. These are things that haven't been seen in the public for years and years and years. And even the parts we are familiar with, like all the burial paraphernalia. It's just so great to see every single element in the same place. These coffins, because he was buried in a series of kind of box within box within box with a sarcophagus. And then we get to the coffins, like the one you see right here. But the one behind it, not the colorful one, but the one behind it, the gold one, um, is my favorite right here. And it's so extraordinary, just artistically, to see what has been accomplished with this. Because what the Egyptian craftsmen have done is, on the one hand, create a three-dimensional sculpture, that kind of mask of the face of Tutankhamun, his arms crossing his chest, this three-dimensional coffin. But on top of that, there's a relief sculpture that decorates the surface. And then if you come in closely, and I have to say, here you see what it is there's the goddess Isis and the goddess Nephthys. Now, this is hard to see, um, but they are both winged goddesses. They're Isis and then Nephthys there, and they are embracing Tutankhamun. They are kind of sheltering him as he makes this journey, escorting him into the afterlife. Um, and you know, the use of gold here, of course, as I said, for the Egyptians, gold was the flesh of the gods. It had a kind of eternity connected to it. Um, but also, it's just so moving to see the way this there. If you see right here, there Nephthys is. You see her kind of arms, which are winged, wrapping them around the coffin of Tutankhamun. It's hard to, yeah, I find it like many things that you experience on a trip like this. And when you go to Egypt, they're very moving and they don't photograph, or they're hard to photograph well. And that's why it's great to see them in real life. I think being in the Grand Egyptian Museum, and I confess, I've been to the Grand Egyptian Museum, but I haven't been there since all the Tut things went on view. So I am as excited as anybody else to have this experience. You know, we're going to be experiencing something that really hasn't happened since the tomb of Tutankhamun was reopened by Howard Carter on November 26, 1922, 104 years ago. And the kind of treasures that he discovered inside there. And these are the original photos, black and white photos that were taken of him in this process. You see him, there he is, you know, examining those coffins I was just showing you, and then moving deeper inside them, as you see right here. This is the gold coffin I've been talking about. And lately, it's been colorized. And you see all the kind of oils and unguents which were added to it. And so when you finally get to the photo, and this is amazing, this moment when the gold mask, so famous, was first revealed to Carter. But it was, you know, showered with flower garlands and precious oils. It's just an extraordinary transformation that this is how we will see it today here in the museum. And it's such a great opportunity for us to experience those things. And then finally, my kind of third thing I want you to think about of Egypt is a place where the past comes alive. It is a landscape like none other in the world. This extraordinary landscape of lush farmlands and the nearby desert, monumental architecture like there, the Pyramid of Djoser. And again, as we visit the tombs, as we visit the temples, you have these awe-inspiring architecture um, of extraordinarily monumental scale. This is the kind of holy of the holies in the Horus Temple at Edfu. Truly awe-inspiring. But the part, I guess, for me, the most moving is to visit the tombs and to experience the lives of people that are depicted before us. This is the tomb of Ramosa and his wife. And rest of the tomb, excuse me, it's the tomb of Ramosa. He's shown there with his wife. That's his other family members to the side, to the left side. And, they're such vivid personalities. And every work of art is a miraculous creation because for the Egyptians, it has the power to give eternal life. And here you see this image of his wife. So beautiful. And that extraordinary eye. And look, her face is seen in profile, the eye is seen straight on. This does not bother me at all. This is just perfect. Uh, and within that same tomb, images of his funeral. So no matter what happens in his life, the funeral will take place, whether it happens in real life or happens in the tomb. He will have a proper funeral, in this case, with these lamenting women throwing up their arms and weeping, or the objects of his funeral procession, where the objects to kind of for his tomb are being carried by the servants. It all comes to life. And I think that's part of what, is so exciting about experiencing these works of art. Wherever you go, I always, whenever I travel to new culture, I always advise people to pretend they believe, if only for the course of the trip. And I will say Egypt is a place that makes that easy. There's something so persuasive in the way these figures look confidently into eternity. And particularly with this one, this is the Menkaure, who's Pharaoh, flanked by two goddesses. And there's something so enchanting the way their arms are pressed together. And even though it's this kind of hard, shiny stone of granite, you really kind of feel the blood coursing beneath their veins. So there's a kind of warmth of their humanity, even with that dark stone material. And these are three of the kind of great works of art you'll encounter in Luxor and Cairo. These again and again, these people who come to life, that it's just hard to believe that there's 3,000, 4,000 years between our life here and their life in ancient Egypt. And there's a kind of, of course, there are prayers, there are incantations that consecrated these images, but it's probably the magic of harmonious proportions and artistic skill, really, that speaks to us across the millennia. It's what breathes life into these images and really wants us to ask the question, who were they? Who did they love? And we really see how powerfully they long for a rich afterlife. And in their tombs that we visit, it becomes a reality. And there's this kind of wonderful, I'll end with this wonderful incantation from the Egyptian Book of the Dead. You who go, you will return. You who sleep, you will rise. Rise, for you will not perish. You have been called by your name. You have been resurrected. That's from the Egyptian Book of the Dead. I hope I've piqued your curiosity. Certainly, I find myself just getting excited about the trip, looking back at these images from my previous trips, and I really hope you'll seriously considering joining us for the new year in Egypt. So thank you. Meg probably has some questions. I'm happy to answer them if anything's come up.
Yes, we do. Thank you very much, Chris. It's certainly a special opportunity to have your informed insights into these sites that reflect this storied legacy of this ancient region. So, as Chris mentioned, we are open to questions. If you have any insights, connections that you made during the webinar, or if you're curious about Chris's approach to these sites, he is happy to stay on chat. If you know Chris, or if you've traveled with him before, you know just how true that statement is. So don't be shy. You can use the button at the bottom of your screen to use the Q&A function to type your question. We will stay on for a few minutes to give everyone who wishes the opportunity to connect with us. So as those questions come in, everyone who has joined today's webinar, or everyone who has registered, will receive an email with a recording of the session. If you're eager to see some of what you've heard about today in person, you can, of course, join Chris in Egypt this new year, December 29th to January 9th, 2027. More information on that will be in that same follow-up email, or of course, you can find information on our website, arrangementsabroad.com. So we do have some questions that have come in. We do have a question about security, which is something that I know we have touched on before.
We have opinions.
Yes, that is essentially asks, with the situation in the Middle East, will this affect the tour? So I am happy to briefly touch on this, and then I think, Chris, maybe you can share some
I have some
from
thoughts.
being there. Fabulous. So we, in light of the situation in Iraq, I'm happy to touch on this. At Arrangements Abroad and the Museum Travel Alliance, the security of our travelers is, of course, paramount. We work very closely with the U.S. Department of State, as well as the government of Egypt and our local partners, to very carefully monitor any level of threat in the situation. In concert with these partners at this time, we're confident in the security of this program this new year, and I'm moving forward with it. For extra peace of mind, our group will be accompanied by private security throughout the program. Chris, do you have any further insights you'd like to lend on that aspect?
This is something, I've asked the same question, and I've, asked my Egyptian friends about this, and I think it's important to know a few things about Egypt. Egypt has the four most important economic drivers in Egypt are: one, petroleum and gas; two, income from the Suez Canal; three, remittances from Egyptians living abroad; and finally, tourism. All of them account for something like 10 to 15% of the economy. And then the rest of the economy is, other things. But those four are the four pillars of the Egyptian economy, and they are desperate to keep them alive. And so for the Egyptians, tourism is absolutely essential. And they will really take any steps necessary to make sure that people have a safe visit, because it's so fundamental to their economic survival. And I will say, my Egyptian guide said to me, the point of the 1979 peace agreement, from an Egyptian perspective, was that Egypt, decided it was not going to become it was not going to be the policeman of the neighborhood. And it is very committed to staying out of any kind of conflicts in the region. And they have, for now nearly 50 years, that is exactly the stance that they have taken. So, there's a kind of geopolitical reason why the Egyptians want to, why it's secure. There's a set of economic reasons why they are very committed to tourism. And I will say, while you're there, we have private security for us, but that actually all groups have private security for them. So at any time that you're in a site or you're in some place, it's not that there's simply one guard. There's both the security in the site, but then also the private security with the travelers. And so I feel very, very safe and secure there. The current government is truly committed to keeping the kind of cultural legacy of ancient Egypt very vibrant and present, not just for tourists, but also for the Egyptian people.
Fabulous. Thank you, Chris. If you have any other concerns and would like to speak with our team about security or any other aspects of this program, we are very happy to chat with you individually. We do have some more questions. Samir asks if there are age restrictions for this trip. Their 9-year-old wants to be an Egyptologist and would love to go. I spoke with my team about this. We don't have age restrictions on this program as long as your child is able to keep up with the entirety of the program. We don't have any child-specific activities or programming, but if you think that they would enjoy what the rest of the group gets up to, they are welcome to come aboard the ship. Peter has asked how much time is allowed or spent at the GEM, the Grand Egyptian Museum. I did also speak with my team about this. It's about 2 to 3 hours. It also includes after hours access. And I hope this is okay to say we have maybe 1 or 2 surprises for that visit. I think that might be enough to put on that. But it's absolutely fabulous. And as Chris said, it just reopened with its new collection. From Brian Goyette, he asks, Chris, which pharaoh would you most like to have dinner with?
With that's an interesting question. I'm pretty curious about Hatshepsut. Just because, the fact that she was able to kind of pull the whole thing together and be pharaoh, she's kind of on the top of my list. Tutankhamun doesn't, the historical evidence kind of suggests that he didn't really develop in an extraordinary way. But I'm also, I would say Hatshepsut Menkaure, because he was the person who created the Middle Kingdom, and kind of reunited Egypt at that point. He must have been a very tough guy. And so I always think these people who are the founders are the kind of interesting people to meet.
Absolutely. Another question from Alan. What impact do severe desert dust storms have on the lands near the Nile? Does it harm or affect the agriculture? With the rise and flow of the Nile.
What effect is, I didn't follow.
The severe desert sandstorms that happen once in a while in Egypt, does that affect the role of the Nile in the lives of the Egyptians?
No, I mean, sometimes those storms, desert storms, do happen. I've never, even when I lived there, I never really experienced one. Sometimes there was, every once in a while there was an issue in the sky of sand. But the kind of life-giving nature of the Nile is it kind of washes everything. I will say, I mean, it does. Cairo's kind of a dusty town, but the sand has a way of giving every kind of unifying everything in terms of its appearance.
Really phenomenal. We have an anonymous question, but a good one, I think, Chris. Do you have any books that you recommend to prepare for the program? So I know that we do send a reading list before every one of our programs, but perhaps if there are any in particular that are favorites of yours that you'd like to recommend?
I normally I wish I'd known it was going to be essay. There's the reading list is the kind of top for
Hmm.
things to kind of be connected to um, is um, the one I recommend. We should share the reading list with people on that
Absolutely. Yeah.
in terms
We
of
we collaborate closely with Chris on all of our reading lists for all of his
yeah
programs, and he always has opinions about what should be
yeah
included. So have
yeah
no fear. We'll certainly get that over to you. I know some of our top ones, Toby Wilkinson's The Nile, Traveling Downriver, um, as well as Barry Kemp's Think Like an Egyptian, Arts of Ancient Egypt, and When the Caravans Were. And
yeah.
of course, the Met has a number of fabulous resources online that we link to as well.
What is the one? See, this I'm looking. I'm literally my Egyptian books are right over there. But there's a small. The reason I want to say this because it's so small, which is um it's like 100 hieroglyphs, and each of them is it's a very simple book, and each of them is um, explained. And then, of course, you get a kind of history or kind of sense of ancient Egyptian culture. And I just can't remember the title of the book right now. It's just across the room. But anyway,
And
it's
we'll
on
make
the
sure it's on
list.
this year's list. Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm sure it's on the list. Yeah.
Janine has a question. How many tombs do we plan to visit? Or perhaps do you have any favorites that you're particularly looking forward to?
How many tombs?
Tombs. Mhm.
Tombs. There's, in the Valley of the Kings, we normally visit at least three or four of the important ones that have restricted access. We always go to Tutankhamun. I love Ramses 5 and 6. We normally visit a couple of other of the very restricted ones that have the most spectacular decoration um, within them. But then we see things. Ramosa is in the Valley of the Nobles, which is one of my favorites. That's why I showed it today. But even very close to that is another one, Senefer, which has beautiful painted vineyard inside the tomb. So we visit quite a few. That's the answer, quite a few. And that there's a lot of opportunities to kind of experience that.
Absolutely. Another important question, something Chris, I think many folks would love to get your insight on. How fast-paced would you say this Egypt program?
I think we do something every day. And there's a kind of nice schedule, but I find it it's not um, uh, I wouldn't describe it as fast paced exactly. I mean, I think that we give time to kind of take these things in. I mean, we have spectacular guides. I'm always on with the groups, but we always give time for people to um, kind of soak in the experience they're having, um, or to shop in the gift shop if that is their priority. So it's kind of to me, it's a very dense schedule of events, but it's not physically it's not that hard um, at all, really. And particularly, having the boat makes things much easier for those days because you were always, you come back at lunch, you're on the boat, um, you don't have to kind of pack and unpack. So um, I find I always have a certain amount of time that I uh, spend on the boat simply taking in the landscape. I always get up early in the morning and you know do some yoga on the deck at the sunrise. So that sure doesn't happen in New York. So I think that it's a relaxing experience.
Thank you, Chris. In conjunction with our question earlier about the tombs, Vicky asks, how claustrophobic may it feel entering some of those tombs? Some of them can be a
I
little skinny.
I can't speak for other people's claustrophobia. I've never had that experience. I mean, even some of them, which may sometimes it, if you want to do something, it may involve going down a flight of stairs and things, but they're all pretty spacious once you get inside. So it's not, um, I'm trying to think, certainly in the Valley of the Kings, none of those are quite grand. So if they're not quite big, there isn't a kind of, I've never had a kind of experience of myself, an experience of claustrophobia there. Um, so yeah, I don't think that's it's not a, it's not an, you can't think of anything we do where that would be an issue.
Perfect. We have a few questions from Susan. Well, questions and some comments as well. It says presentation was fabulous, so thank you very much, Chris. I've been to Egypt 4 times this year, saw the gem and visited for an entire day and a half. Fabulous. It says definitely go and spend more time in the gem on their own. Also curious if we ever extend this trip to Alexandria, which I know, Chris, you've mentioned a few times.
I'd like to do that. We haven't, I mean, we've never done it, but uh, I would certainly recommend if someone's interested in it and coming to either, you know, I'm sure arrangements abroad could help you with either visiting Alexandria before the trip or after the trip. I am a giant fan of the um, Andre Aciman book Out of Egypt, which talks about his childhood in Alexandria. Certainly it's a great idea.
Hmm. Thanks. An interesting question here from Paul, who asks about restitution. Curious your insights there, especially with your friends in Egypt. Do you know much about the status of restitution, how much was performed on the artifacts, or how accurate it is? I think this is particularly in connection with the gem museum. If you've had any
Um,
conversations with your Egyptologist friend.
well, I mean, Egypt has a somewhat unique situation in that um, early on in the 19th century and into the 20th century, they established the system of partage, in which they gave licenses to foreign entities who would come, like the Metropolitan Museum of Art, like the French, like the Germans, who would come and excavate. And then there was a splitting of the fines, and that system of partage was legal. It wasn't. There was looting, but this was an attempt to prevent that from happening, to create a legal way for these artifacts to find their way into foreign collections, to create a legal way to bring extraordinary scholarly expertise into the study of this civilization. And so, but still, some things come on the market, and there have been instances of things that came into museums with fraudulent paperwork that was subsequently found out to have been looted, and those things have been returned to Egypt. Egypt has a couple outstanding claims, um, probably rightfully, against the German government, because the head of Nefertiti was taken in this partage exchange, but it was never actually shown to there was kind of the archaeologist who was meant to judge, and they simply showed him the box but didn't show him what was in it, um, and gave it a very lackluster description. And so that is an ongoing every once in a while you'll hear about this demand for Nefertiti to be returned. But it's less, in some ways, less of an issue than it is with certain, sadly, than other places like Turkey, for instance, where there has been, lots of looting that took place, that many things entered the international art market illegally.
Wow, that's a great question. Thank you very much. A couple of comments. Susan Kaplan recommends the MFA Boston exhibition. So the collection there is absolutely
Yeah.
fabulous. We had some shout outs from some of your past travelers. Anne Van Rensselaer says hello. Fantastic lecture.
Oh, great.
Nora Blay says hello.
I love Nora. I'm hoping, Nora, I want you to come on this trip. Nora's been on this trip before, but we didn't have the cut stuff. So I'm hoping she comes on this one. Yeah.
Perfect. Ruben Stevenson Cantwell also says thank you. A couple of questions. Harriet Frank asks, will there be any sound and light shows during the programming of some of those temples, not those light up shows?
I don't think we have any planned. I'm not aware. There's none planned. Sound and light shows, when they're good, they're great. When they're not good, you're like, what am I doing here? So I don't think any are planned that I'm aware of.
I'm of the same opinion. Unless there's a surprise in there, but I don't think so.
Yeah.
Susan Kaplan asks, Luxor? Yes, we will be visiting Luxor.
Oh, yeah.
Particularly special place.
Yeah.
Chris is, we can't go without going to Luxor.
Yeah.
Chris. It's fabulous. Deborah asks, will we be going to Amenhotep 1112, newly opened? I am not sure if we'll be visiting that specific tomb. I'm happy to check in with my team.
The visiting
Amenhotep 111.
Not sure. But this is, I'm not sure.
Why don't I check in with my team, and if we have more information
right.
about that, we can send it in our follow-up email.
Yeah.
Perfect. There is a sound and light show at the Luxor Temple. So I'm not sure if that is included in our
yeah. I mean,
program,
we go to the Luxor Temple, and we go actually at sunset, so you kind of get it lit up, and it's kind of spectacular. That's not exactly the sound and light show, but it's pretty good.
Fabulous. Okay. We are coming up here on the end of our time. We have just a couple more questions. And Chris, if you also mentioned you'd be happy to stay for a few minutes if anybody wanted to continue to stay and chat a little more individually with you. Elizabeth Linger asks, are there any Jewish museums or history sites on this trip?
We don't have on the trip. We don't visit any of the Jewish sites, but there is in Old Cairo. There is we sort of only have a day of Islamic Cairo, but if you wanted to get there a day early, I really recommend a visit to Old Cairo, which includes the synagogue, which is really an interesting place to experience.
Really special. Fabulous. Okay, that is all the questions that we have in our Q&A. So we'll stay on for just a few more minutes. Thank you all again for attending. If you have any more questions for Chris, we'll stay on for a little bit. And again, just a reminder, at the close of this webinar, everyone will receive an email with a recording of everything that happened here live, as well as links to more information about this trip in Egypt. Chris, obviously, thank you again for lending your time and expertise. I know I and all of us here have been edified by your insights. If you enjoy these webinars, we will be doing another one, so be sure to join us in September, where we'll be joined by art historian and Renaissance expert Linda Simon to hear about the Medici family's connection to Florence and the Renaissance. So we'll send that information soon. Thank you all again for attending, and check your emails with more information very soon. Wishing you a very pleasant rest of the week.